Hey, Gator fans, welcome to a peek inside Gator football. Allie Peek here with Justin Rowland with Cats Illustrated. Justin, this is now, I want to say, the third year in a row you've joined us. I appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm great. It's a tradition. It seems like we've always got a lot of drama to talk about, and now maybe more than ever.
Always. It is never a dull moment in
Yeah.
Gator Nation and SEC Nation. Kentucky has had their own share of drama this year. You got that first SEC win of the season at Auburn. What kind of lift does that give this team? And is there the ability to maybe carry that over into Saturday?
Yeah, you've got really two threads going on right now. I don't think any fans are really upset that Kentucky beat Auburn, but I do think that they were in that group of schools where it's like, are we going to make a coaching change? Are we not going to make a coaching change? And winning that game, Auburn made the change, and you had the athletics director Mitch Barnhart down on the field, looking very excited, hugging Mark Stoops, hugging defensive coordinator Brad White. So the team is definitely still plugged in. And Cutter Boley has done some really good things at quarterback over the last month. He had maybe a step back in the win against Auburn, but it was a vintage Brad White defensive special. The defense has been a little bit up and down this year, so it's hard to predict consistency and trends, but that's really everywhere, one week to the next. You don't know what you're going to get from anybody. So I will say what we've seen from this team is even if they've been at the bottom of the SEC power rankings, it's still a team that can jump up and bite you. I mean, they almost beat Ole Miss. They played Texas. They should have beaten Texas. And then they had this win over the weekend. So they're competitive, but probably in a similar situation to Florida. You don't have a lot of confidence in making the big plays in the big moments.
Yeah, I mean, that basically was what I was going to ask you next. 3-5, but just exactly as you pointed out, played Ole Miss close, took Texas to overtime. So do you really feel like this team is better than its record suggests?
I think they probably are. That's fair. But then you look at a game like South Carolina, and South Carolina really hasn't done anything this year, and they were very lackluster in that game again. So even when Kentucky has looked good and you've been impressed with what they're doing on offense, or hey, the quarterback is building some momentum, number one, scoring has been really hard. They haven't been able to score enough points in most games to capitalize, and the defense has been more up and down than you would expect. It's not quite as big, as physical a front seven. I don't think they do get after the quarterback really well, but you can't bank that it's going to be a great defense every single week. So it's a little bit up and down, but their hope is Cutter Boley develops at quarterback, and he would be the first high school developed quarterback that Mark Stoops has really ever had at Kentucky. Then you got to keep him. So there's a lot of questions right now.
So this game is going to be the first time that Kentucky has been an underdog at home against Florida in a while. Thanks, Billy Napier. How much does that fuel this team or this fan base?
Yeah, that's got to be a wake up call for Florida fans. This is a series that has totally changed for Kentucky, right? It used to be in the bucket with the Tennessee series where it's 3-4 decades of losing games. And now it's a tricky game for Florida because Florida hasn't been at the level that they were at. And Kentucky really gets up for the Florida game. Florida has almost become like a rivalry level game for Kentucky where you just know some games kind of take on a life of their own, right? Series, they do seem to play out the same way every year. It hasn't been that way, but you can expect Kentucky's going to play better against Florida than they play against Tennessee. That happens almost every year.
Yeah. I think Florida fans remember DJ Lagway having a really good game against the Kentucky defense last year. But
Yeah.
I mean, usually Mark Stoops' defense can get Florida on lock, or at least recently, outside of last year. How do you think Stoops' group plans to adjust to the dual threat ability this time around, now that they're a little bit more familiar with what Lagway brings to the table?
I think it's a little bit of a dangerous week for them. They're probably going to come in confident after the Auburn game. And I don't want to totally poo poo that, but Auburn looked really bad, right? Some of that was Auburn's offense was just terrible. And Lagway, I mean, from what I remember, it was like 30 yards of completion last year. I mean, he completely blew up any statistical we thought we knew for Kentucky in last year's game. So if he's able to run around more, like it seems like he's running a little bit more now, the problem is times when things break down. They're not quite as talented on the back end of the defense as they've been in some other years. They put some guys into the NFL. And so there is, I think, a potential to exploit the back end of the secondary. And they've got a couple of guys out as well.
Let's talk a little bit of Kentucky offense. Who are some key offensive weapons that Gator fans should know heading into Saturday?
Well, Cutter Boley is what everybody's talking about right now. They just have not had a high school quarterback come through the ranks that's really developed, and it may be too little, too late. But he really looks good. I mean, he has really good ball placement. We saw inaccuracy for the first time really against Auburn. He's a big guy who's not really a threat to run, but he's the best pure passer that Kentucky has had maybe since Andre Woodson, which you got to go back a long way for that. They don't have a lot of great receivers. They got a lot of like complementary parts. Kendrick Laws, a Swiss Army knife from Alabama, get him the ball in space. That's the goal. But they've leaned heavily on throwing to the tight ends, Josh Caddis and Willie Rodriguez, and then running back transfer Seth McGowan has been dealing with some injury issues. But when he was healthy, he was one of the top backs in the SEC.
So would you say, a go-to receiver that is going to potentially be a difference maker?
They've had some freshmen, DJ Miller, Cam Miller, step up and start to make their presence felt. But that's really like why you're optimistic about Boley. Like he's looked good in spite of not having a number one receiver. And I think when you look at Kentucky's roster right now, I like this era of college sports because you can talk about roster management like it's the NFL and you can judge the decisions that they make. They lost Barryon Brown and Dane Key at receiver, and that's just too much for Kentucky to lose at any one position room in an offseason. There was no way they were going to be able to replace that amount of talent in the transfer portal, and they end up spending a bunch of money and spreading it out, bringing in a bunch of guys who didn't have breakouts as fifth, sixth-year seniors at their previous school. So I think the lesson there is if you have a talented player at Kentucky, you have to do whatever it takes to keep them.
Watching, some of that Auburn game from last week, Kentucky's defense really shut Auburn down. And I know you said Auburn didn't look good, but 7 sacks, 241 total yards allowed. I mean, that is impressive. Was that a one-off, or do you think that that's a sign that things are starting to click now this late in the year?
Well, they do have good pass rush personnel on defense. So Florida will be aware that they've got a couple of defensive linemen that are really disruptive. They've got Mike Humphrey Grace was a transfer from South Dakota. He's been a great player. Khalil Saunders, a senior they've developed, who had a couple of sacks in this last game against Auburn. David Gusta was a transfer from Washington State, and he was one of the best interior defensive line pass rushmen in the transfer portal. They got 3 different kinds of edge transfers that have come in and they can get after it in the backfield. So pressuring the quarterback is what they do best. And that was by far their best game of that. Some of that was Auburn's offensive line banged up and really struggling. They had one of the youngest players in the conference that was starting at center for them against Kentucky. But yeah, if your offensive line is leaky or has some holes, they can't exploit it.
I think hallmarks of Stoops defenses are that they're disciplined and that they're physical, and that they don't usually give a lot of points up, which, it's so interesting to look back at your games and see the points that you gave up to like South Carolina, but then how you were able to control more teams like Ole Miss and Texas. How has this group evolved over the season, and where do you think they've been the most vulnerable? Like, where can Florida potentially attack?
I'll give Sleeper some love. Go check out the Sleeper app and use my code PEEK, P-E-E-K, for 100% match up to $100. Check their terms and conditions because terms of use apply. We appreciate Sleeper for their support.
You make a lot of great points about the points and what Kentucky is known for. Some of that is just how they play, right? Kentucky, you got to win a certain way, and Lane Kiffin is going to win one way, and Mark Stoops wants to win a different way. So Mark Stoops probably wants a game where each team only gets 8 possessions, and they're going to run 4 minutes off the clock, even if they just get 2 first downs, 5 minutes off the clock. And so he really protects his defense. So a lot of times, even if Kentucky's only given up 24 points, you think that's a good game. But a lot of that was the whole plan was to make it a low scoring game.
Yeah.
I will say that their philosophy is to be big up front, stop the run, and keep everything in front of you on the back end. And that's been a pretty good strategy because most college quarterbacks are not mature enough and advanced enough to pick you apart down the field for 4 quarters.
Right.
So the defense has been a strength for Stoops, and again, more often than not against Florida, it has performed pretty well.
Kroger Field has seen now 10 straight SEC home losses. How big a deal would it be for Kentucky to snap that streak against Florida? It's a night game. How big would that be for momentum and for your fan base?
Well, I think the fans would again be torn because you beat Auburn and Florida back to back. I think you're getting what I've said to people is you're getting close to exactly the situation Florida was in last year,
Mhm.
where the Gators got a little bit hot. But if I recall, you go back and you look, I'm not saying it wasn't a real surge, but was it the best teams that they were playing that they were beating in those games? Or was it a little bit of fool's gold? I don't know how much you can transfer momentum from one season to the next in college football in 2026. So a lot of fans will probably be a little bit leery if they want to change. Hey, we go 3-1 down the stretch against Auburn, Florida, Vanderbilt, and Louisville. It's going to be really hard to not bring Stoops back. So it's a huge game for Stoops.
So where do you think the floor is for bringing him back? Like, is it bowl eligibility? Is it picking off Louisville because they're your rival and maybe taking down Florida? Like, what does he have to do to ensure a next year? I honestly, from outside looking in, I kind of thought Stoops would be at Kentucky forever. There were
Yeah.
talks. I remember when the Texas A&M job opened and that almost happened. And they just, over the years, there have been talks about, will Mark Stoops make a jump? And it kind of seemed like he loved Kentucky and it was home. And this was kind of a forever, as long as he wanted it thing. And that's really feels like it's changed a little bit this season.
There was a number of things that happened around the time they won 10 games for the last time in 2021. There was the Texas A&M job coming open, and it looked like he was out the door for that, and that soured a lot of fans. I never understood that. Just objectively,
Yeah.
most coaches would make the move from Texas A&M to Texas A&M from Kentucky.
Mhm.
But there was also the feud with John Calipari, where Stoops infamously claimed basketball school. I thought we were in the SEC. Of course, Kentucky is always going to be a basketball school, and that looks really bad when you go 4-8 and
Yeah.
7-6 and 7-6. So I think watching it's probably not fair to look at Indiana and say why can't Kentucky do this, but when you look at Missouri going 26-6 or 7 over a stretch of games, and you see how topsy-turvy up and down teams are in college football, there feels like there's a window where you can do pretty much anything anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's why fans are like, all right, when can we get involved? So that's what they're thinking.
So what's the number though? How many does he have to win to stay?
I think if he gets to 6, he'll probably be back. If it's less than 6, I don't even know that he would want to come back because it's been a really toxic environment with the fan base. And as long as he gets his money, I wouldn't be surprised if he's willing to negotiate out.
Okay. So if Kentucky
Yeah.
is going to pull off the upset, what has to go right and who has to shine?
Boley has to play well, right? Florida is better than Auburn. So Kentucky could win at Auburn in spite of Cutter Boley making like 3 that should be a turnover plays. That can't happen against Florida. That he has to be more like he was against Georgia, more like he was against Texas, more like he was against Tennessee. And then number 2, they can't be bad on the back end. Like last year, Lagway just absolutely made them look foolish, chasing receivers in space and leaving huge gaps in zone coverage. And the defense has to be more sound in communication on the back half, I think.
Okay, so flip side, what matchup worries you the most if you are Mark Stoops? Is it Lagway's mobility, Florida's defensive front? Is it something else entirely?
It's the defense. I mean, the offense just has not. The biggest problem is even when the offenses look good, you can't bank on them scoring more than 17 points in a game. I mean, even with the win at Auburn, they scored 10 points. I just have a hard time believing they're probably not going to win this game if they don't score around 20 points, and that's a high bar against Florida's defense. They haven't given up a lot.
All right, it's early in the week, so you might not be ready to do this, but do you have a prediction?
I will. I'm gonna predict I'm gonna predict a Florida win. I hadn't really settled that in my head yet, but I just think that the Auburn win was more about Auburn being in a really bad place. They were ready to fire Hugh Freeze, right? And the quarterback, they went to a second stringer who they were working on how to throw a spiral with him in the pregame, And I feel like there's going to be an overreaction to that win from Kentucky. And fundamentally, Florida's problem, winning situations, making plays when they count, that's been Kentucky's problem, but I think it's been worse for Kentucky. So I'll go with Florida in a battle of two teams that don't know how to win.
All right. Well, let everybody know where they can follow you and check out your work and argue with you on social media.
Yeah, right.
Do these days?
It's Roland Rivals on X, and then you can get Cats Illustrated by Kentucky.rivals.com. And really appreciate you guys having me on again.
All right. We appreciate it, Justin. Good luck this weekend. Have fun.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.